It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
I'm Kyle Hyman, here with Andrea Serrani.
Good morning.
On Mondays, we like to take a look at the saints that will be celebrating feast days over the next week. So, who do we have this week?
Well, today's the feast day of Saint Elena, who I had never heard of before, but she has a really cool story. She was born in a pagan family in the early 600s. She secretly converted to Christianity and would attend masses held with other Christians in secret. Then her father found out that she had converted, and he came to the conclusion that Christians had bewitched her or tricked her into it. I love it. This is inexplicable. She must have been duped. So he sent guards to the secret place where they were having mass to bring her home, but she resisted, and during the fighting, she lost one of her arms.
Oh, wow.
So they took her to jail, and she died from the injury there. According to one of the legends of Saint Elena, an angel appeared and took her severed arm back to the chapel where she had been worshiping. And her parents were so shocked by the miracles and the witnesses talking about their faith that they decided to become Christians themselves.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that kind of cool? So
Yeah,
today's
interesting story.
Saint Elena. Tomorrow we honor Venerable Matt Talbot. Venerable Matt is often considered the patron of men and women struggling with alcoholism. So he was born in Dublin and had started working when he was young to help support his family. And he got a job as a messenger for some liquor merchants. And from just being around it all the time, started drinking and then drinking more and more and more, and spent 15 years until he was almost 30 as an alcoholic. So then he decided to make a pledge to stop drinking just for 3 months. And instead he was going to focus on going to confession and going to daily mass. And then those 3 months turned into years. And although he wrote about how hard it was sometimes for him as he tried to avoid the people and places that used to tempt him to drink, he ended up being sober for the rest of his life. He joined the secular Franciscan order and began living a life of penance. He abstained from meat 9 months of the year, and he spent hours every night reading scripture and the lives of the saints, and he prayed the rosary all the time. And he never became rich or anything, but he made a point of being generous to missionaries and things like that. He died in 1925, so actually not that long ago, as far as saints go. So if you know any alcoholics, be praying for Matt Talbot's a good intercessor.
I just heard somebody recently praying for his intercession. I didn't know anything. So
that's why.
Good to get this story.
Yeah. Wednesday, June 20th, just look up a list because there are a lot of blesseds and saints, and almost all of them are martyrs on Wednesday. And they're from all over the world. Ireland, England, Japan, Korea, more ancient ones in the Roman Empire. Lots and lots of martyrs on Wednesday. Thursday is St. Aloysius of Gonzaga. So happy feast day to parishioners at St. Aloysius in Yoder, just south of Fort Wayne. He was born into a wealthy family at the ripe old age of 7. He was 7. Little Al had
When he was born?
Yeah, a profound spiritual awakening.
Oh, I see.
No. Anyway, then at the age of 9, he traveled to be educated. And then by 11, he was teaching catechism to poor children, fasting 3 days a week, and practicing great austerities. Right? Can you imagine being shown up in your holiness by an 11-year-old?
I'm going to tell my kids this story.
Yeah, right.
This is my expectation.
Let's go, guys. Okay, so then when he was 13, he traveled with his parents and the Empress of Austria to Spain, where he was a page in the court of King Philip II. But then he found out about the Jesuit missionaries, and he was determined to enter the order. But his dad had other ambitions for him since he was the heir to their big fortune. So his dad tried to get all these prominent priests, bishops, and lay people to convince Aloysius away from the priesthood. But he was undeterred, so he finally was allowed to enter seminary. But only 4 years in, when he was only 23, he became sick in a plague and died. Yeah, so he's a patron saint of teenagers and young people. A lot of times you'll hear him invoked as a patron of them. So a cool saint, St. Aloysius. Okay, Friday is the day that's stacked. Friday, June 22nd is the feast of St. Thomas More, who I could talk about all day, but I won't. He's famously known as the man for all seasons, thanks to the movie. He was a scholar, a lawyer, a gentleman. He was a dad. He was a layperson. Cool. It was always cool when we have lay people saints. Eventually, he became the Chancellor of England, which is one of the highest sort of political rankings. He was under King Henry VIII. I could say so many things about him. I took a whole class on him in college.
Yeah.
Anyway, He is most famous because when King Henry decided to break away from Catholicism so that he could get divorced and remarried, St. Thomas refused to support him, even though they were friends. So Henry had him beheaded. So St. Thomas More is the patron saint of lawyers and politicians. So if you want to keep them in mind on Friday, it's also the first day of Religious Freedom Week, which is not Fortnight for Freedom anymore. Now it's Religious Freedom Week from the bishops. So we'll have more on that. Friday, also the feast of St. John Fisher, who lived at the same time as St. Thomas More. And he was made a bishop in England at only 35. And one of his interests was raising the standard of preaching in England. He himself was an accomplished preacher and a writer. He wrote, this was all when Martin Luther was starting to write about his ideas. And St. John Fisher was really well known as writing against Lutheranism. But eventually, St. John incurred the wrath of King Henry when he wouldn't give Henry an annulment for his first marriage. So Henry had him imprisoned, and then eventually St. John Fisher was killed 2 weeks before St. Thomas More. So they share a feast day now. Also, a saint I had never heard of, whose feast day is Friday, is St. Paulinus of Nola. He was friends with this whole list of saints. St. Augustine, St. Jerome, St. Melania, St. Martin, St. Gregory the Great, and St. Ambrose.
Lucky.
I know.
No wonder he's a
friends.
saint.
Exactly. He was born in modern-day France and became a lawyer and a successful political figure in the Roman Empire. And he became so rich, he retired at a young age and lived a life of leisure and ease with his wife.
Okay.
But they both, after their newborn son died, he died just a week after he was born, they were inspired to convert to Christianity and began giving away all their possessions to the poor. And their holiness ended up being so pronounced that a bishop decided to ordain St. Paulinus, even though he hadn't asked to be ordained. It was like a surprise at Christmas Mass, apparently. I don't think that happens anymore, but I do like that it happened once. Yeah. So anyway, he ended up becoming a bishop and lived a really good life of holiness and leading the flock as a surprise priest. Sunday is the feast of the Nativity of St. John the Baptist. He's one of the only saints with 2 feast days. So live it up. We're celebrating his birthday on Sunday.
All right.